Every few years, South Africa burns. Shops are looted, people are chased, lives are upended, and the world watches, shakes his head, and moves on. But here is what I think we're not talking about enough: that this fire is not an accident, it is the symptom of something much deeper. And until we diagnose it correctly, I'm afraid we will keep treating the wrong patients. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Chika Ago, and if you're new here, kindly take a moment to subscribe, especially if you enjoy this sort of content. I want us to start with what everyone thinks this is about. South Africans frustrated with unemployment, with poverty, with a government that has failed to deliver, look across the street and see a Zimbabwean running a spaza shop, or a Malawian immigrant braiding hair, or a Nigerian trading goods. And the conclusion, fueled by politicians and rumor mills, is these people are taking what is ours. That right there is the misdiagnosis, and it is a dangerous one. Here's the reality: immigrants in South Africa are not accessing state resources at the expense of the locals. They are largely locked out of formal employment. They cannot access public funds the way citizens can. They survive overwhelmingly, by the way, in the informal sector. So think corner shops, street trading, petty goods, just the everyday hustle and bustle of the average poor citizen. They are there because the rand, the South African rand, weak as many South Africans may feel it is actually stronger than many currencies across the continent: the Zimbabwean dollar, the Congolese franc, the Nigerian naira, the Zambian kwacha. The people come to South Africa because of currency differentials, not because a government handed them a job that was meant for locals. So if a South African is unemployed, the question is not why is that immigrant running a shop. The question should be, why has the government of the day, after nearly 30 years, or actually more than 30 years of democratic rule, still not built an economy that can employ its own people? That is where the anger belongs. It should be directed upward at power, not sideways at equally poor people. That right there is what is missing. But here's what I need you to understand. This is not new. And if you read into history, you'd realize that this is not uniquely African. This problem is one of the oldest and most predictable patterns in human history. And the countries that are today holding themselves up as models of civilization went through exactly this, with even more violence and even less excuse. Let's start off with Britain. The very polite British people. You see, when Irish workers flooded into Britain throughout the 19th century, escaping famine and poverty, they were met with open hostility. I mean, it makes what is happening in South Africa today look like a joke. They were blamed for driving down wages, taking housing, overcrowding cities. In fact, you would see "No Irish Need Apply" as a sign posted outside employers and landlords across England. There were riots in Liverpool, Manchester, and London. The British press described the Irish in terms that would be considered hate speech today. The way South Africans call immigrants kwere. The accusations were identical to what you hear, these South Africans make. They're taking our jobs, they're changing our neighborhoods, they peddle drugs, they do not belong here. Today, Irish and British citizens move between both countries freely under arrangements that predate even the European Union. That's just one. I'll give you another one. Germany. After World War II, what used to be West Germany was rebuilding from rubble and needed labor. So they actively recruited workers from Turkey, Italy, Greece, and the previous Yugoslavia. They called them guest workers. The assumption was they would come, work, and leave. They did not leave. And when the German economy slowed in the 1970s, these communities faced a violent backlash. Turkish families in particular became targets. The worst moments came in 1993 in the town of Solingen, where neo-Nazis set fire to a house occupied by a Turkish German family, killing 5 people, including 2 girls and 3 women. Germany spent decades in bitter public arguments about whether these people belonged on German soil. Today, Turkish Germans are woven into the fabric of German politics, culture, sports, and business. They are Germany. They are Germans. Going back into even further, let's go to France. In 1893, in a town called Aigues-Mortes. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right. I know I'm getting it wrong. A French mob attacked Italian salt workers, killing dozens. The Italians were resented for accepting lower wages. Polish miners in northern France faced the same hostility throughout the 20th century, accused of stealing work from French people. And in the almighty United States of America, the same script played out with every wave of arrivals. The Irish, the Italians, the Jews, the Poles. The Know-Nothing Party of the 1850s was explicitly built on anti-immigrant politics and won real political power. Italian migrants were lynched. Jewish communities were attacked. These groups are now so embedded in American identity that nobody questions their place there. And here is what connects all of these stories. The accusations were identical. Every single time, these immigrants are taking our jobs, they are suppressing wages, they are refusing to assimilate, they are loyal to a foreign home. Go back to your country. Why are you here? Go and fix your country. Word for word, century after century, continent after continent. And in every single case, the tension did not resolve through expulsion. It resolved through economic integration and time. The Irish built Britain's railways and became British MPs eventually. The Turks rebuilt Germany and their children grew up speaking German as a first language. The pattern is so consistent, it almost functions as law. When economies fail their own people, those people find a foreigner to blame. The solution has never been removing the foreigner. The solution has always been fixing the economy. So when a populist South African politician tells you that the Zimbabwean is your problem, they are reading from a script that has been used by failing governments for at least 2 centuries. And it has never for once been true. Now, I want us to contrast this with what actually happens when people eventually choose the other path. Because as you can now clearly see, Europe did not just stop attacking its migrants. It went further. It decided to make borders almost meaningless. Think of the fact that France and Germany fought 3 major wars in 70 years. 3. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870, where Germany seized French territory and held it for decades. World War I, and then World War II, which killed tens of millions across the entire continent. These were not border skirmishes. These were civilizational conflicts. Today, France and Germany are the twin engines of the European Union. Their economies are intertwined. Their citizens cross borders freely. Their currency, the euro, is the same. Now, how did that happen? It happened because after World War II, a group of statesmen decided that the only way to make another war structurally impossible was to make their economies inseparable. In 1951, they created the European Coal and Steel Community, binding French and German industries, industrial capacity so tightly that going to war would mean destroying your own economy. In fact, one of its architects said its shared economic interest is the only durable peace.
Okay.
That community, that economic community, became the European Economic Community, which eventually became the European Union, which is now the largest single market in the world. And if we were to even go back further, the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 fought across what is now Germany, France, and Sweden, and half a dozen other territories. 8 million people dead in an era when Europe's total population was a fraction of what it is today. It ended with the Peace of Westphalia, a settlement that essentially said we cannot keep doing this to each other. We need frameworks. We need a way to coexist. Europe had to bleed catastrophically before it chose to build. And I would argue Africa is in that bleeding phase right now. The xenophobic attacks in South Africa, the hostility at borders, the suspicion of the neighbor, I would say this is our war moment, not in scale, but in meaning. We're at the point where we have to decide, do we keep fighting each other or do we build something together? And South Africa's story is not unique to South Africa. Ethiopians and Eritreans are fighting. They've been like that for years. Nigerians and Ghanaians, we all remember. It's still happening at the moment. East Africans are there debating free movements. We all carry versions of this. The question is whether we learn the lesson before the cost becomes unbearable. Now, I know a lot of you might disagree with me, but I want to make this clear. This is not really about feelings or, nostalgia for a Pan-African dream. I think this is about money. It's about profits. It's about prosperity. And we're not doing it right. Africa has 54 countries. 54 with dozens of currencies, dozens of central banks, dozens of trade regimes, dozens of border policies, and we are out here trying to compete with the euro, a currency that represents 20 massive economies speaking with one monetary voice. Let's not even talk about the US dollar, the world's reserve currency, backed by the largest economy on earth. In many cases, when two African countries trade with each other, they still have to convert through the dollar first. So when a Zimbabwean wants to pay a Kenyan, it first converts to dollar before it converts to shilling. Think about what that means. Two neighbors on the same continent cannot exchange value without routing it through a foreign system. That's just inefficient. Some might even argue that it's a structural tax on African commerce that we have to pay to institutions outside of Africa every single day. Think of the African Continental Free Trade Area. It exists precisely to begin dismantling the problems that we're dealing with right now. It's the largest free trade area in the world, just by the number of member countries. Designed to do for Africa what the European single market did for Europe, which is reduce barriers, increase intra-African trade, build a continental economy that can negotiate from a place of strength. But you cannot build continental integration while your citizens are burning each other's shops or seizing buildings and properties and assets. You cannot have a functional free trade area while the politics are built on blaming the foreigner. The economics require the politics to actually grow up. And the politics will not grow up until the people demand it. So this is why xenophobia is not just a human rights issue. It is economic self-sabotage. Every shop owned by a foreigner that is attacked or forced to shut down in Johannesburg tells investors this continent cannot manage its own internal relationships. Every immigrant go back to your country protests sends a message to the world that Africa does not even believe in itself. There is an image I keep coming back to. It is this image of crabs in the buckets. You do not need a lead. The moment one crab starts climbing towards the top, the other crabs pull it back down. Nobody escapes. Nobody makes it out. The bucket does not even need to be sealed because the crabs have agreed, without necessarily agreeing, to keep each other in. That is what we're doing. Zimbabwe collapses, and instead of a regional framework that destabilizes it, its people scatter. They go where the currency holds, where there is relative peace, where the informal economy has room, where it's closest to them. That meets these requirements? South Africa. And South Africa, instead of asking why a neighboring country collapsed and what that means for regional stability, begin to attack them. On your own soil. Now your locals are affected. Your economy is affected. Look, nobody makes it out. Nigeria has the largest economy on the continent. South Africa has the most industrialized infrastructure on the continent. Ethiopia has been one of the fastest growing. Egypt controls one of the, if not the world's most strategic waterways on earth. Ghana has built a reputation for stability. Kenya has a tech ecosystem that continues to draw global attention. Now imagine what those strengths look like combined. I'm talking real trade, actual movement of people, proper integration, real negotiating power at the global table. Compare that to what it looks like when we spend those same energies suspecting each other of crime. One path leads out of the bucket, the other just rearranges who gets pulled down next. And, whether we like it or not, prosperity attracts people. That is a fact of human movement across all of history. You will not stop people from moving toward opportunity. You can either build so much shared prosperity that the movement becomes mutual and generative, or you can guard your poverty with hostility. But you cannot guard your way to development. It has never worked. Not once, not anywhere. So, if you have watched this far, here is what I want you to carry from this. When you see footage of xenophobic attacks in South Africa, I don't want you to watch it thinking of it as a South African problem. I want you to watch it as an African problem. A symptom of a continent that has not yet decided to be on its own side. The anger is real. I get it. I understand South Africans. The frustration is legitimate. Unemployment is real on this continent. I understand South Africans. I'm Nigerian. Economic exclusion is real. I get it. But the target is wrong. The government must be held accountable. The systems must be reformed. The tools that were put in place to deliver prosperity must actually be forced to work, e.g. the AfCFTA. It must be pressured to actually deliver. African countries must move towards integration. We need to rethink our borders. That is the conversation we should be having, not whose people are taking whose jobs. But what kind of continent are we building, and who answers when it falls? Again, remember that Europe bled for centuries and chose integration. The Irish, who were chased out of England, built England's infrastructure. The Turks, who were burned out of Germany, built homes, built the German economy. Africa does not have centuries to figure this out. The world is moving fast, and a fragmented continent competes as fragments, small, isolated, and worst of all, easy to exploit. The Chinese know how to navigate this continent better than anyone else. We're better together, and that's not idealism, that's just economics. That is history. That is the only play that actually works. So it's your move. My name is Chika, and thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.